All right. Welcome back to the podcast here at Tomboy Official. All right, so this is the part where I kind of go a little back in time, and I'm gonna kind of explain some things that are about to come up in this episode. So yeah, like this episode isn't meant to be necessarily like negative, but there was a quote I found by it was on Fuzzrico's Instagram, and nothing against Fuzzrico or anything, or this other person. I'm just kind of curious about the idea that was presented, because I was thinking about it, and I was like, at first I was like, yeah, that's true, and then I'm like, is it? So it was, I found the name of the person named Justin. I don't know if it's Justin Laboy, Laboy. It looks like Justin Laboy. And that's the quote I'm going to be talking about on here. I can't find it specifically on that person's Instagram when I'm scrolling, but it comes up on Fuzzrico's page. So basically the concepts that it touches on are masculinity, and on strength and weakness. At least from the viewpoint that I was coming from, it seemed like it was talking about male father figure weaknesses and how that impacts maybe a daughter or a daughter figure becoming a masculine or feminine personality person. And so in this episode, kind of the conversation goes about talking about strengths, masculinity, femininity, parental roles, mother and father parental roles, and then kind of going into, childhood roles, not necessarily as kids, but like adult children, their kind of dynamics, and then moving from that, kind of also how relationships and lifestyles are kind of formed, and just kind of looking at those like through my own lens, pretty much. Like I talk about my own experiences with some of the stuff, and then kind of like jumping into just in general, not looking at like necessarily my generation of like adult children who are my age range, with parents that are like my parents' age range, or parental figures that are my parents' age ranges, but kind of looking at the dynamics in general in Western American culture about like pretty much the dynamics of relationships in general, divorce rates, or even when there is no divorce or there is no separation, and just two-parent households, single-parent households, and parent households that are maybe two-parent households, but maybe not a super healthy relationship between those two parents, even if they are still together. And then how that kind of translates into, the adult children my age range, their partnerships that they're finding, and their friendships and relationships later in life, as the people my age range kind of, choose their own social circles and their own dating life, and then starting to compare, to other cultures, like using the example of that show, Indian Matchmaking, and how the parents are so involved in the dating versus our current Western society where we don't really have that much of the parental environment. Here comes our routine sirens. So yeah, and just kind of looking at that, but I understand that the experiences I talk about are kind of more specific to me because I've got like more of an African culture inside of a Western culture. But not only is it like an African culture, it's like a very conservative Christian Adventist religious culture on top of the African culture inside of the Western culture. So it's kind of like, and I've definitely had a lot of exposure to a lot of different cultures too, and it's something that I value, and kind of how I value diversity in my social life and different viewpoints. I don't want everybody to need to be my religion that I grew up in or from the same cultural background or anything like that. I'm comfortable with people from a lot of different places and different viewpoints, and that's fine with me. I like it that way. And then also the choices that I make as far as like if I party, use substances, like whatever, like versus the really conservative people in my life that don't do that, and kind of like how that kind of stuff influences the amount of openness or closedness that I can kind of have with them, because it's like it almost forces me to have to be trying to kind of not like hide from them. I'm not hiding my life, but it's like I tend to keep things not out in the open. So for example, if I was gonna buy wine and have it in my room, because maybe if we're having like a boozy Zoom video game kind of chat thing with friends, if I wanted to do that and put it in my room, I would just drink it and put it somewhere that maybe wouldn't be right on top of a dresser or right on top of a desk out in the open. It would be maybe in the closet, like put it in the closet, just behind the door, maybe not even hidden behind a bunch of stuff, but behind the door of the closet, and just close the closet. And so my view is like, okay, if somebody comes in my room when I'm not home, say I'm in San Diego visiting friends, and it's not uncommon for my parents to like to clean around in my room. Like I don't keep it like super messy, but they like to clean, and like they'll move stuff around. Like I don't know if it's nosy or not. I kind of question if that's more so what it is because I'm so closed. That's one method of them being involved. Like my mom's always like, yeah, I'm gonna sweep and like change the sheets and like whatever. Like it's stuff that I'm like, I don't want to do that anyways. I don't want to like do all the like sweeping and mopping and like like cleaning all these like sheets and bedding and all that. Like if somebody else wants to do that, that's one extra chore that I don't have to do. So I'm kind of in my head, I'm kind of like, go for it. But they're not like going through cleaning like every little detail, but it's like there's a little bit of like maybe involvement in my room when I'm not at home sometimes. But it's like I'm not like hiding things away, all of them away. Like I've got like queer pride related stuff with rainbows stuff all over the place in my bedroom. It's very visible, as well as in my car. It's very visible, as well as posting online and stuff. It's very visible. And so if people happen to open a drawer or open my closet and they see something, I'm like, well, that's on you. Like, I wasn't hiding it necessarily, but I was keeping it out of obvious view, just because I know it bothers them that I do things that they don't like. And I'm kind of just like, that's just how it is, like, and so, just looking at that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I don't know, I was thinking about it, and I was like, this kind of sounds a little negative. But I don't really know for sure, if it is fully negative. So that's kind of my lengthy 10-minute intro. And hopefully you like the episode, and here's the rest of it. It's a long one. It's raining this weekend. I've not got too much to say. But just relaxing. Been working on the online projects. Haven't really come across too much that is like brand new, but there's like an interesting idea that came up. I think it was on Fuzzrico's page. So she's a kind of singer, R&B singer, kind of Masc presenting, I would say, but also has like a femininity aspect too, like, I'd say, kind of hard to explain her vibe, but there was a comment, there was something posted on her story, because it was like her story from her birthday weekend, and so I was like scrolling through, and there was a comment, not a comment, but you know how people repost like other people's, I guess when they, I don't know what they're called, where they make those like a little poster or like a little quote or something, and then someone else reposts it on their page. So it was one of those. I can't remember who made that original post that she had posted on her story with her birthday clips and stuff. But it said something along the lines of weak men create masculine females, and strong men create feminine females. And I was thinking about it. I mean, I feel like for the most part, most of the people I know who are more on the masculine side of things, that were born like females and cisgender, they either had maybe father figures that weren't too involved, or that had some kind of problems. I don't know if I have enough, a large enough sample, because I also think about things like divorce rates and separation rates and things like that. And when I look in general at the majority of the people I know, I don't know that many people who have two parent households, especially once they're in their 30s or so. It's not like a judgmental comment. I'm just saying, I don't know a lot of families who have two parents that are still together, while the kids are usually the ones that I know, like my age range, adult children, in like their 30s age ranges. I don't know that many people who have two parents that are still together, still married. And of the people that do have two parents that are still together, still married, because I do talk with people about their lives and, things. I would say most of those people with the two-parent households tend to identify some kind of like issue where it's like maybe the parents are still together, but there's definitely like massive things that are going on that maybe the parents aren't working on. They're not like, they don't seem to be like actively trying to get like, some issue resolved, but there's like definitely issues going on. And I'm thinking about my own family members, my own like maybe cousins, my own friends, my own, just people I know, people through, like professional relationships and things like that. That's pretty much across the board. I think there's a smaller number that I've noticed of people in their maybe 30s that have parents that are still together, that have a very strong, relationship without anything either impacting the kids or some big like problem going on between the two of them. I just don't know that many people that have that for themselves. But when it comes to the statement or that quote about, strong men creating feminine women and weak men creating masculine women or masculine females, I wonder, because when I think about it the other direction, when it comes to, say, mothers, would I say that a weak mother creates a masculine male? Or a weak mother creates a feminine male? And a strong mother, or a strong woman in general, but I think that was referring more to I took it as like mothers and fathers, or like legal guardians, or like whoever was like bringing the kids up, because it said weak men and strong men, so I'm thinking weak women and strong women. Would strong women create feminine males, and weak women or weak mothers create masculine males, like maybe even with that like toxic masculinity kind of aspect of things? Is that accurate or true? I don't know. It's kind of more of a question. It kind of almost reminds me of the argument between it's kind of like an argument, excuse me, I'm like got something weird with my throat. Like when I was growing up, and I don't hear that as much today, but when I was growing up, there was this big argument between nature versus nurture for sexual identity kind of things, and if you're gay or straight or whatever. And a lot of times people were saying, it's nurture. So if a parent or the parents were like, usually they would point to like, if a female is a lesbian, it's because her father, because she had like some kind of daddy issues because of her father. And if a male was gay, it's because of something with his, I think it was father as well. Or there was that kind of teaching or kind of information provided in society that I don't know how accurate it even is, but I'm sure people who are like millennial generations and older definitely heard these types of things, right? That you know, a person's gay because they had some form of abuse in their life, and the form of abuse made them not like whatever that other gender was that was abusive towards them. I mean, I don't know about these things. Like, I don't know if it comes from, if there's accuracy towards it, you know. I think, so okay, if I put it this way, I look at certain societies, right? I look at American society, and you know, divorce rates have always been high. Like, I think in my whole lifetime, it's been like over 50%, which has been pretty normal. And then if you look at during the Rona, there was a really high divorce rate then. Two, I don't remember the numbers, but there was definitely a lot happening with relationships during that time period, where people were stuck at home in the house all the time with one another, and maybe like reevaluating some relationships and things. All kinds of relationships, though, not just romantic ones, but a lot of times there was information that was kind of floating around about that, trends that were kind of being noticed. And I've talked about it before that I like this show on Netflix called Indian Matchmaking, and I kind of see how, you know, they show the parent dynamics with the kids, and there really is a lot of pressure in parts of the culture for the marriage, and how involved the parents can be in that part, like the culture where there is kind of more of a matchmaking service involved, a matchmaking person involved. There's a lot more communication about like qualities of what's good in a relationship, and then also a lot more support, right? Like there was an episode where the first date that one guy was matched to go on with this lady was combined with his married brother and the sister-in-law, which was the brother's wife. That was the first date, and I'm just thinking, and you know, also like it wasn't uncommon, at least in this show, because I don't really know the culture too well, but you know, for them meeting at the first date to, you know, one of the parties going to meet the family, like the full family, like the parents, the siblings, coming into their house and meeting, you know, the family. It looked like they just like had tea and like cookies or something like that, and just like there was so much like involvement in like the dating process. And it sounds like, you know, a lot of these people were, for the most part, I think mostly Indian, and did have experience with like, you know, Western modern online kind of dating sort of things, and apps. And a lot of them were saying kind of the same thing that I hear most Americans saying who use those apps, saying like it's kind of hit or miss, you know. And there was kind of some different quality, better quality to the matchmaking process, but I'm sure that involved like, you know, a more formal aspect. It's not like, you know, when you're on a dating app, you're not like, oh yeah, like I swiped right, we get a little chat in online and then try to schedule a date. But wait, you know, before we go out for that first coffee, or before we go out to mini golf, or before we go out to dinner or whatever, on the first date, we're gonna, you know, come over to my house or my parents' house, and you're gonna meet my parents. You know, that I feel like it wasn't that process. Like, so they kind of had two worlds of, using the dating apps, just dating like that, and then involving like a matchmaker. And I felt like the conversations were so different. So yeah, I was pretty surprised, and it's a bit of an impressive show in my opinion. It's my second time around rewatching it. It's only 2 seasons. I wish it was like 20 seasons. I love it. It's a good show. Again, I don't know how accurate it is to the culture, but it's very, like, it's got a wholesome vibe to it. It's not like based on like drama and suspense and like, how a lot of like Western reality type of shows are just like showing people screaming and breaking stuff, and then they break to a commercial, then they come back, and then you're like, oh god, like what happened? Like, it's not like that, like it's really just kind of like dating and conversation about what what they do or do not get as far as like the vibe, the connection, certain things. Like there's some negative kind of like maybe just naturally how people have certain hang-ups or deal breakers, like if somebody's late all the time, or if somebody's like cancels a lot, or if it's very one-sided, because it seems like in this show there's a lot of traveling for a lot of them. Like some of them don't even live in the same states or cities, and they're like traveling to different, like from Dallas to like LA or something like that, to like meet other people that they're getting matched with through this service. And it seems like they're okay to do that, to go on a first date in another state even, or some people even across countries, like and yeah, so it'll be like some people feel like, oh, maybe it's really one-sided, or that person's too busy for me, or maybe they didn't show enough interest, or sometimes like one person thinks it's going really well and is really interested, then the other person's like, oh, like it wasn't going, I didn't really excuse me, I didn't feel the chemistry or whatever. I did something in my throat. I ate really spicy pho, and I feel like, I don't know if it's like cilantro. I don't think there's cilantro in my throat, but it feels like there's something a little irritating my throat. I don't know what it is, honestly. But yeah, anyways, they had that kind of conversation about some of the negativities that they experienced. And so to me, it was like a curious kind of process. It really is still, but I kind of like just the way that they talk about practicality of like, okay, we're trying to like match, not just for kind of similar with how you would maybe match yourself through a dating app and find a spouse or a partner. And usually it's like the things that a lot of us people in the Western world look for tend to be, there's that, you want the chemistry, you want the, kind of like an energy that you prefer, you want, activities that you prefer, like, for example, for myself, I find it really hard to be involved with someone who, like, two things, like, I would say for me are hard to deal with. Someone who's a complete couch potato, who almost never wants to go out or leave the house and just wants to sit around and watch movies all day and nap and sleep in like all the time. And the second thing would be someone who maybe doesn't work, maybe, I don't know, like full time, like, or, you know, close to full time. Like, I feel like it's just my own opinion. I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I feel like when someone's working like maybe significantly under 30 hours a week, and not getting benefits and things like that, like it you know, unless they're making like a whole lot of money, you know, in the area that I live in Southern California, it's just not practical, you know, to be trying to support oneself, not working full time and having benefits. I understand there's definitely emotional drain. Transportation can be an issue if you live really far from work, or having like family or health things that you need to take care of and prioritize. Like, there are definitely exceptions, but for me it's a bit of a hard thing when it's like, if I meet someone who maybe doesn't have a job yet, or if I meet someone who isn't working a lot and they never worked a lot and they're, you know, in a struggle with that, and then I think about, in reality, like, how's it going to be if we get together and, you know, they already can't afford anything as it is, you know, what are we going to be doing together? Like, can we even like hang out and do stuff? Like, of course dates don't have to cost like a whole lot of money, but it's like, you know, if it's even too hard to afford transportation at all outside of just getting to and from work, I don't really know how realistically that would really match my life. Like, for example, I'm in LA and going to San Diego maybe about once a month. I mean, like, you know, I've dated someone who's in the opposite city that never comes up, you know, to LA and things like that, where it's like, okay, you don't even come visit, you know? It's kind of like, yeah, I have a whole life down there and whatever, but it's like, you'd think, you know, in like a year and a half or something of knowing somebody, that they would at least once or twice make more effort to visit you. Things like that, you know, where it's like, you know, or people who just never exercise or don't care about, like, I don't really care if it's like sports, but like don't really care about their bodies and things like that. Because to me, those three things make me feel not motivated too, if I'm around people too much who either don't really care to kind of have a strong work ethic or a positive outlook about work, or people who, you know, don't have a positive outlook about their physical health and what they eat and stuff like that. If I'm around people who just neglect all three things, as well as complete couch potatoes, stay indoors, never have like a sense of adventure, I mean, to me that would create a lot of depression in my life. I don't think, for me, just being in a relationship with somebody, and if things were getting, you know, we're getting closer, and say there is a time where we would maybe decide to move in with one another, possibly, I think their lifestyle would kind of be a downer for me, and it would bring me down, and I would not get motivated through them. And I think, you know, just even if I really love the person, it would be really hard for me to be like, okay, you're all like you're no, you know, like, you're totally enough for me, even though your lifestyle is like, you know, not helping me work on my own goal or motivating me. Like, when I'm around like what I perceive to be like kind of like laziness and people that are like really in a depressed state, you know, it makes me feel lazy and depressed, and like, oh, there's snacks, like, let's get snacks because there's snacks in the house, and like, oh, you buy a bunch of junk food, so I'm gonna eat the junk food, or like, you only want to get McDonald's, so let's eat all this McDonald's and stuff like that. So it's like things that I would maybe naturally never do, or that I might struggle with, if they kind of keep doing those things, you know, it would be hard for me to be like all gung-ho about like, yeah, work is hard, but like, let's just keep going, and like, you know, one more week and then I get a few days off, and then I'm taking a little break, and like, then I'll just get back into it and things like that, you know, versus somebody who's like, oh, I don't really, you know, work but like twice a week or something, because not because it's working for them that way, but because they just, hate working and stuff like that. Like, to me, that would get really kind of hard to build a life with. And, things like that. But, I feel like in our Western society, we do tend to look at that type of thing, like the deal breakers. We look at the energy. We look at maybe like hobbies, values, interests. One thing I don't think we focus on a lot is the integration of the families. Like, how is this person going to fit into my family unit? And I think the reason why, maybe, I'm just thinking of this now, I don't know. But I think the reason why is because in Western society, people grow up, they move out, for the most part, they move out from their parents and they have such an independent life from their parents. I mean, that's something I kind of struggle with, because it's like, it's something I'm definitely experiencing currently, because it's like I moved out, lived away for quite a while, developed a whole life that was ideal to my own preferences, and then some of that is kind of against, maybe what my parents would value and other family members would value. And so it's hard for me to be, it's not impossible or terrible or anything, but it's a little complex to be in a house with people who it's like simple things, like they don't go to clubs or bars, and I go to clubs and bars. They don't really interact at all with anything that's like queer culture related, and I do. They're very knowledgeable and understand a lot about two things, which is religion and education, but those are kind of the only things that are the real focus. And otherwise, it's like they don't really challenge themselves on like other worldviews or different cultures and things like that. Like, they stick with what they know, when it comes to things like, sexuality and, just different things like that. Like, they're very closed-minded, when it comes to even closed-minded about like straight sexuality. It's like closed-minded about things that are, that the religion traditions aren't like comfortable with. They're not comfortable with that, not open-minded about having a drink here and there, not open-minded about so much. Honestly, like, the closed-mindedness about so many things is just, that creates a big challenge for me, but it's also like, all these years I've been kind of not really living with a household of that kind of attitude. So it's like, I'm finding out more about my parents' and family's viewpoints on life, and they're finding out about my values and things that I do, and there's not a lot of overlap in our lifestyles, and I mean, it's not, there's no real like direct tension about it. But I mean, an example I can give, I went to a wedding in Georgia, one of my cousin's weddings on my dad's side, and a lot of my dad's side of the family was there, like a whole lot of my cousins, a whole lot of my aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and then the family that my cousin was marrying into, or the guy who was marrying into our family, a lot of his family members. And so, I was there, and this is just one example. Within the same day period, one of my aunts who I hadn't really met before, I'd been hanging out with her. She's a little older than me, and I'd been hanging out with her, getting to know her. We were sharing a hotel together, me, her, and her daughter, and so we're getting to know one another. And once we got to the actual wedding venue. We were there early. There's a bar. I had my ID in the car. So we were going to buy drinks, but my wallet and ID were in my mom and dad's car that they were renting. And so, my mom finds me because my dad's off with his family. She finds me, and my sister's in the wedding. So my mom finds me and starts like lingering around, and I'm just kind of like, great, because she wasn't really too interactive with a lot of the aunts or cousins that I'd been interacting with for like the past couple days, and went to parties with them and all this other stuff. And so by this point, I've already built a rapport with a lot of people. And so, we're by a bar. No, this was the reception. This was the reception hall. So this is after the wedding. I think the same day, but later on in the day. This is like night. And so it's raining, storming, hailing outside and things. And there were multiple hours between the end of the wedding and this reception. So we all get there early, and we're kind of, getting, information about which table do you sit at. I'm not trying to make this negative. I'm just trying to point out this is how the dynamics are in my family. If I don't say anything, if I just let the chips naturally fall where they may, this is how, my folks are with things, socially. My dad goes off with his family. He's taking pictures, all this stuff, mingling around, because he knows everybody. My mom doesn't know anybody but me and my sister and my dad and a couple other aunts, uncles, cousins, a couple of them, but not everyone. So instead of going and hanging out with the aunts that are like her age, she kind of starts coming over near me. And I mentioned, like my dad was driving me, my aunt, that aunt's daughter, the one that I was saying I was sharing a hotel room with them, and my mom around. Like, he rented a car and was driving all of us around. And so I go, early. We're all there. We're kind of like in this lobby-ish type of area. And there's a bar. And, I didn't have pockets. I'm wearing like wedding clothing. And, my wallet is in the car that my parents had rented and were driving. And it was storming outside, and so me and my aunt, my aunt's like, do you want to grab let's get a drink? And I'm like, cool. And then I just realized, I'm like, shoot, my wallet's in the car. And I wasn't going to ask her to pay for anything or whatever. I'm like, my wallet's in the car. So I, my mom's kind of like a few feet away. So I'm like, hey, can I get the keys? And she's like, why? I'm like, I need to get something out of the car. And she's like, what? And I'm just like, geez, like, seriously? So I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to get my wallet because it's in the car so I can get a drink because I need my ID. And, I had money in my wallet. I was like, I'm not trying to make other people pay for my drink. So she's like, you don't need a drink. You don't even drink. I'm like, and I was just like, yeah, I do drink. It's a wedding. Like, I'm going to celebrate with my cousins, And then, she wouldn't give me the keys because she's against the drinking, and starts acting all like strict and weird about it, where it's like, this has never come up. Like I mentioned, my parents don't go to bars. They don't go to clubs. We're never in a space where I'm buying drinks in front of them or getting alcohol in front of them. When we do go out to dinner to get, dinners, I don't order alcohol, and neither do they. When we buy household groceries, there's never alcohol there. So I basically do my own thing and I get my own drink, well, no, that's not what happened. I, just tell my aunt, oh, I can't really get one because my stuff is in the car. And she's like, oh, it's on me, no worries, She's like, your dad's been buying us breakfast, like, no worries. Like, she was chill. So I'm like, okay, fine. And so I'm like, oh, thank you so much, And so she looks young, and she's buying the drink, but her ID is from Europe. I think she's from the UK or lives in the UK, so her ID is a UK ID. And so because of the way that the IDs, I guess the month, year, all that kind of stuff, it's kind of like backwards in a way or whatever. Like the bartender was kind of checking the ID and like a little like, wait, what? Like you don't look this age, and like what kind of ID is this? And like, you know, they were kind of like not too knowledgeable. And then, you know, so she wasn't too knowledgeable. The bartender wasn't too knowledgeable, but eventually just realized, okay, you're from another country. A lot of these people are from another country here, like, you know, and serve the drinks. I think I got a mimosa, and she got wine, like a glass of wine, and I'm just sitting there, you know, I'm like, thank you, and then she splits and goes and starts like talking to some people, and I'm just chilling, sitting there, you know. I find like the nearest seat, like it's not like we're still in the lobby area, so there's like couches and like chairs and stuff. So I find a seat, sit down, and I'm sitting there drinking my mimosa, and you know, my mom's just like standing there. I ask her if she wants the seat, she's like no, and then she's kind of standing there leaning there. I'm like, okay. And then these two, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 guys that were from the other side of the family that's marrying in, they come up, and because we're all mingling, it's a lobby, there's probably like an hour before this event even starts, so people are there catching up. Like there were probably like 4 or 5 hours between the end of the wedding and the start of this reception. And so all that time in between, we had been taking pictures. That took a good like 2 hours or so. I think some people found some food to eat, snacks to eat, maybe drop by something similar to like a Starbucks or something like that. And then, you know, we're just kind of hanging around town, you know. We weren't going back to the hotel to sleep or like going to other events. We were all just kind of catching up, because I had family from different African countries come into Georgia. So it's like all these people, you know. And so, you know, we're all there early too, because we're like, well, the weather's terrible outside, so we can't even like go outside or walk around. We had to be indoors, so we're like, well, might as well just like get drinks at the bar or like whatever there is to have there. And you know, at receptions you eat, so like there wasn't time for the meal yet, so we're all just like hanging out, mingling, which is fine, you know. But my mom's not mingling, she's like hanging around me. I'm getting annoyed because of the way that, you know, like I said, there's a closed-mindedness. So other people are drinking, everybody's drinking, it's a social environment in a lobby. These 2 or 3 guys that are probably my age, maybe a little younger, come up and start talking to me. They're probably in their 30s, I'm in my 30s. They come up, start talking to me, and I recognize, you know, they're from the other family. So they're not my relatives. They're from the other family. And so I start talking to them, just to, you know, they start talking to me first, asking who I am and stuff. And then I say, this is my mom and my dad. You know, I can't remember if I pointed him out, but I was like, yeah, he's the uncle to the cousin who's getting married. He's taking a lot of the pictures. Like, he wasn't the main photographer, but he was taking a lot of the pictures. And he was taking photos and walking around and talking to people. And I was like, yeah, so-and-so is my dad. And he usually knows everybody, so I was just like, let me name drop and see if they know who he is. So I'm trying to like explain who my first cousins are, and that this cousin that's getting married is one of my first cousins. And so I'm just kind of like, I'm one of the first cousins of the bride, and like all that kind of stuff. And my mom starts like leaning in and like kind of like trying to like deter this interaction, you know. And I'm just like, you know, in my head I'm just kind of like, back off, you know, like. But that's how things work, like socially in my family. It's like I can't even openly talk to guys that are nearby my age in front of my parents, or have a drink even with family members in front of my parents. It's like completely ridiculous, right? So when it comes to me looking at like shows like this Indian matchmaking show, and I think about, okay, like they're more open-minded towards their kids having their own life, their own values, their own views. A lot of times in these shows, they're going out for drinks. A lot of times in these shows, they're meeting the people that are spouses, or potential spouses and partners. I've even mentioned, I have siblings who date, cisgender siblings who do straight dating. And, sometimes my parents even have weird stuff to say about that they're like not okay with. And so it's like things like that where I'm like, there's no problem, there's no problem. Maybe there's like a problem that they bring up about the race of the person, or that they're not the same religion, or like all these kind of things. And I'm just like, these, aren't really issues, where it's like to the point that even if I did have somebody that I was interested in, I wouldn't be comfortably just like inviting them over, bringing them home. Like there is that kind of like aspect where we all butt heads, where it's like we don't have similar views, and the way that they interact, I feel the way that they kind of interact with people at times, I feel kind of socially gets in my way, because I kind of see how people interact, and I'm flexible with like, maybe I'm not going to get drunk, but I'll have a drink with you and drink a few sips and drink it down, maybe or get something light, that's not going to really get me drunk, and drink all of one and just like babysit it for like hours. So it's like, yeah, I'm having a drink, but it's like, it's not like really a drink, I'm not like getting drunk or anything. But yeah, when I look at dynamics with the relationships and dating and meeting people and mingling, even at a family function, wedding, where I'm around plenty of aunts, uncles, people that are way older than me, including my parents, my folks still have a method of trying to step in the way of me interacting with people to potentially, mingle with people, get a number, talk about my life, like whatever. Like I wasn't interested in these guys, but they were my age, and I totally could have seen myself, hanging out with them for the day and mingling, and they're cousins now, they're relatives now, so it's like, like let me get to know them, but I feel like the way my mom was kind of being and stepping in the way she did was kind of just like, there is this kind of like, they always kind of maybe joke or like have this kind of like, oh, like, why aren't you married? We're going to get you married, like, blah, blah, blah. But then like I always say, like, like people say actions speak louder than words. The actions that they have aren't really, showing that they actually want me to get married. So when it comes to anything with relationships with me, I really don't share any of that with my parents. I don't talk to them about it. I don't talk to them about the people I meet, because I don't think they would approve. And it's not because these people are bad people, but it's just because they're just so weird and uncomfortable with things like dating and sexuality and like all that kind of stuff. Like even me recording this podcast in the house, I'm kind of like, I don't really want them to overhear what I say, because it's like weird, like they're very like, I don't know if they're like just reserved about certain things, but their ideas about sexuality, I know for a fact that, they're against porn. I know for a fact that they're against, like, I think I mentioned before once when me and a friend used to have this like ongoing joke for a while about like getting each other kind of weird, like maybe like a slightly sexual gag gifts. Like I'd get him these like sexy like silk boxers or like these like sex manual type books and stuff. And then he would get me these like Chippendales calendars and things like that. And how, when I first got one of those calendars, how we had dogs, and how you put gifts under the Christmas tree. He had wrapped it, so I put that as a gift under the Christmas tree. And the dogs had been running around the house. And you know how they have nails, claws, and they kind of like slipped over, at least I was told, one of the dogs kind of slipped on one of them. And you know how the back of the calendar has all the little thumbnails for every month, and it showed like a little ripped area in the wrapping paper with part of the thumbnail of one of the months with one of the guys with like, like you could see parts of like muscle, chest, pecs kind of thing, biceps and stuff like that. And like, it wasn't like the whole back of the calendar, but it was like a little peek at a part of it. And then, when I actually opened it on Christmas, because I already knew what it was, like, but I didn't know, like, what it actually looked like, but I already knew what it was. And Chippendales, they're not nude, but stuff like that, where it's like, they see it, and they kind of, like, my mom was looking through it, like, to see maybe if she approved, kind of, like, make sure there's no nudity, or make sure they're just muscly guys with like bow ties on and like clothes on and stuff like that. Then I'm like, dude, it's a Chippendales calendar, it's not a big deal. Like, and then another thing, like I remember I used to have this like I've kept stuff at my family's house for like ages. Since I moved, like there was a lot of stuff in some drawers and stuff that I never cleaned out for ages. And I I had this. I explained this before too. I had this like, I bought something way back that came with like this weird, like, I guess technically it was like a dildo or vibrator kind of thing that took like D batteries or something, and it sounded like a freaking lawnmower. It was like loud, and so I was like, well, I'm never gonna use this thing, so I just like tossed it in a drawer. And it was in there for years. I would come back and forth between the house and it would be in there. And then suddenly, once I started coming back, like I guess after the pandemic, sometime around then, I noticed it was missing. And I'm like, I didn't take it. So somebody must have gone through my drawers and thrown it away. Or taking it, I don't know, but it's like things like that I'm like, okay, like that's fucking weird. Like clearly I'm not using it, but just knowing that it's not there, it's like, okay, and I feel like in a way it's like they know that I'm grown, they know I'm an adult, but they still want to kind of monitor what I do and not really push, like there's no conversation about it too much, but it's kind of like the actions behind, like I can tell what they don't like, what they don't prefer me to be doing, just by the way things go. So things like that. But I feel like all that kind of stuff isn't really conducive towards someone my age trying to like find a partner or spouse, or even dating in general. It makes it harder, because it's like, how do you even share any of that of your life with them? I can't post things on social media, I can't do anything. They want to be involved, but overly involved, but also they're ultra conservative about everything, and I'm not ultra conservative about almost anything. So I try not to like force my views on them, but then it's like the dynamic we have in this house is not like those Indian families, you know. Like if I had somebody I was going on a first date with, I can never imagine inviting them over or wanting to even invite them over. And you know, I get like no help about like advice about dating or all that kind of stuff. Like all that kind of stuff I figure out on my own. I talk to my friends about it all the time, but you know, as far as the family dynamics, there's no real connection with like the family being, you know, a supportive unit and like helping out. So I think my experience in Western culture is different because, you know, not only are my parents not involved, or I don't feel comfortable involving them in that aspect of my life, but they're not comfortable with it either. And, you know, add queerness on top of all that, you know. I mean, there's no way to really involve them, you know, in that aspect of my life. I mean, even when it's with like straight people in a chaperoned environment that are the same race, they're not even comfortable with me just like mingling amongst, you know, people who are, you know, extended, you know, in-laws type of family, you know. It's like you're not going to get that much closer to home. You know what I mean? And so, yeah. But I don't know. That's kind of how I see it when it's like looking at those kind of views about the extended family, those views about, you know, a strong man or a weak man or a strong woman or a weak woman. I don't know how it is with masculinity and femininity or how any of the kind of relationship dynamics with parents or abusive experiences kind of shape, or maybe they don't shape sexuality, kind of like masculinity, femininity between any males or females, or how the divorce rates impact things. But yeah, in my household is like, you know, like just the other day I explained, you know, my parents found my, you know, backpack that has pot in it. It's like, you know, we're in California. Who cares? You know, like I'm not smoking that pot in the house, you know. And yesterday I just found one beer, a Sapporo that I bought when I went, when I was in San Diego last time. I got takeout at this really cool restaurant called The Village. It's vegan. It's kind of near North Park-ish area. And it's right by one of my friend's houses. So I was going to my friend's house. She said I could bring food, drinks, whatever. Now, I didn't know if she had drinks or wanted cups or anything like that. I thought she had her own drinks. And so I was gonna, you know, so I was like, well, let me just bring a beer, an unopened bottle of beer, because I was staying at a hotel. So I was like, well, I don't have anything here. So I was like, well, when I get my takeout food to take to her house, because that place was right near her house, like 5 to 7 minutes away. And then I got the drink that I wanted, and then I was like, I might or might not drink it. I was like, if she's gonna drink, I'll drink. If she's not gonna drink, then I'm not gonna drink. And so I didn't want to waste it, you know. I was like, I don't want to throw it away or throw it down the drain. But I did, you know, end up bringing it back into the house, and it's in one of my drawers. And, you know, it has a bottle of, it's just a bottle of beer. It's a bottle of Sapporo. It's not the normal size. It's a little bit bigger. So I'm like, next time I have a drink with somebody, I'll bring that one and shoot. So yeah, I kind of wanted to just speak to that, just because that's kind of the vibe that I get from the folks, from the parentals. It's like I can't even have an unopened bottle of alcohol in the house. I can't even have weed that I left in the car. Like, it's not that I can't have it, it's just that I kind of know that they don't want that for me. And even things like going on dates or whatever, like, they don't want me to really be, they're not comfortable with me doing any of that stuff. And I'm very independent and adventurous and outgoing, and they're not. So, there is a bit of that kind of clash. Like, there's tension, but there's no, like, arguing over it. But, like, I like my privacy on things. I like my space. But I do kind of see, with Western family dynamics, just kind of like how it is normal to have, parental units that don't really vibe with the same values that their adult kids have. And, therefore, there's not really a lot of that, like, oh, I have this date, I'm bringing them home on the first date kind of thing. Like, there's really not a very strong involvement. And it doesn't even have to be because of, some kind of tension or whatever. Just, it's not part of the culture either. But, I couldn't realistically see it working. I've got African family culture in my house, and it's not only African, but a strong religious, Adventist religious idealism. I don't know what you call it, but that kind of thinking, and very conservative about things like substances, alcohol, cannabis, tobacco, psilocybin, you name it, sexuality of any kind, even like sharing a bed, sharing a house, sharing a room, and not being married, things like that. So it's like, I don't really see, if they're so uncomfortable about everything, I don't really see myself involving them in those parts of my life. And also, I get like no helpful input from them either. My family dynamics are not like the Indian matchmaking series show on Netflix, where I would trust my parents with that kind of judgment, or trust them with that kind of interaction in my life. I don't really need them involved in my life in that way too much. It would be nice, but I don't see it happening just because they're so, like, strange about it. Like, my parents almost can't even have a conversation about dating. They are still tripping 4 to 5 years later that my sister has a boyfriend, and how, I think when she first told them, she first mentioned, oh, it's a friend, he's coming for Christmas. And then she's like, oh, we've been on some dates. And then like, oh, actually, he's been my boyfriend for a while. And just the way, not that long ago, my mom brought that conversation up to me. And I was just kind of like, well, the reason probably why she did that is because she wasn't comfortable, because she knew how they would be. And they weren't comfortable. And I just kind of, I didn't really make a big deal, but I was just telling her, I think you guys are making a really big deal out of this. It's really not a big deal. And that's just how I said it, and nobody mentioned it to me since then, but before then they brought it up to me at least 4 or 5 times, and I'm like, yeah, of course she's been dating somebody. She's like a 30-year-old woman. Of course she's gonna be dating, you know and just how she wasn't too comfortable explaining that to them, just because you can tell what your parents kind of expect, and they don't really understand like the natural course of things. They want us all to live at home. My dad was like expressing that the other day, just kind of like, my mom often expresses that she prefers me to live at home. Another family member, I have a couple aunts that when they're online with my parents talking and stuff, and I'll be in the background and they'll be like, don't leave, just stay home with your mom, kind of thing. Now, I have to honestly say, I just opened the window, so I hope the traffic and the rain isn't too loud, but I have to honestly say, none of this is too huge of a deal. I'm just trying to make a point. I told my friends this, I decided near December that I'm just going to do what I want to do, what works for me. If they find, I'm not throwing stuff in their faces, but if they're going to be involved in near my stuff and touching my things, they're going to find out things about me that they're probably not going to like, and that's their problem. If you're roaming around by my room and you hear me having conversations with friends or people online, or cursing and saying things that you don't want me to say, or you happen to be wanting to go in my room and you are the one who is wanting to clean in my room, and so you're the one cleaning and you find that there's a beer somewhere, or you're the one who's curious about, I'm the only one driving a certain car, and you find a backpack in there and it happens to have weed and the backpack is open and the backpack is mine, and I say that it is, it's like, don't be disappointed. You're the one who's finding it. It's mine. I was already doing these things for years. Like, I know people say, okay, we want you around, we want you to live here, but at the same time, it's like, do you want a version of me that you prefer, or do you really actually want me here? I'm gonna come here and I'm not gonna throw stuff in people's faces, like I'm saying. Like, I smoke outside. That's why the weed is in the car, because I don't smoke weed in the house. So if you're gonna see that there's a backpack, and even if it's open, if you're gonna look in the backpack and make an effort to bring it in the house and ask whose it is, it's your fault if you're disappointed. Don't look in the backpack. Don't bother other people's stuff. If you're gonna clean and find things in a drawer or something, don't be upset, because it's mine. I'm not throwing it in your face, but if you open something that happens to have something in it that you don't like, I was keeping it out of your face, but I'm also not hiding, if that makes sense. I've got a little rainbow flag in my car. My good friend gave me a QPOC, queer person of color, LGBTQ plus, candle that had a sticker on there. I've got my little pride memorabilia with the lanyards and all the wristbands and all these little things. I post on my Instagram what I feel like I want to post. I might be having a drink with a friend. I might be at a rave. I might be in the mountains. I might on occasion, be somewhere and there's like pride flags in the background. You're the one who's looking on my Instagram. If you're my parent and you're looking on my Instagram and you find something you don't want to find, I mean, that's your business for going through my stuff, for my pictures and all that, like, I'm not going to hide it, I'm not going to throw it in people's faces either, but I'm not going to hide it. And so, that's kind of, near Christmas, I decided to live, just kind of like do things the way I want to do them for the holidays. And that's just what I decided. I'm like, if there's events that are happening that I don't want to participate in, I'm not going to. If the family wants to do this and I don't want to do it, I'm not going to. I'm not going to bend over backwards for people. I have my values. I have my way of living life. I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. I'm not shoving my beliefs down their throat. But I do have a different method of living life. I socialize with all kinds of different people. I don't just weed people out based on their religion or whether or not they do drugs or curse, and things that are just completely, to me, like a little bit on the superficial side. Like, I could see how, someone might not want to be around people like drinking or something like that, or people who maybe aren't too aware of the language they use when they're speaking and stuff. Like, not the language like from what culture, but the language like cursing, profanity, certain types of conversations. Everyone has their kind of things that they're comfortable with, and I get that. I feel like I'm being respectful of it, but like I mentioned, like, they've got a lot of kind of thinking about the world that's very from their view, because they live life differently. They do things differently than I do. And like I said, I respect it. I'm not, they can do what they want to do. It's their house, but, I'm going to do my thing as well. I'm not going to put my life on hold and stop doing things that I enjoy just because, I'm here. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. I'm not like, I do have my limits too. I'm not like going against my own values. I even told my mom that I don't watch those church videos that she sends me. She always sends the whole family the church service streaming link, and I told her I'm not gonna watch it, and she just keeps sending it. It's like, okay, you can send it every week, but I don't really care. But like things like that, where I'm like, I'm not sending you like, pride, invitations every week. I'm not sending you all the Riches. Riches is the gay club. I still get their texts about their weekend events and stuff. I'm not sending you all the like Queers Are Us, text messages that I get of events that I want to go to and stuff. Queer events and whatever. But yeah, that's kind of so I say all of that to say that's kind of how I have been. I'm trying to turn on this light. It's kind of been mostly a bit of my take on things. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. To me, it feels right. It feels fine, But like I mentioned, I kind of like my privacy on stuff too. And, it's kind of for that reason, because I'm like, around people who are kind of very conservative, you know. If I wasn't around people like that, I'm usually very, very open with my friends and people who I talk to that I feel try to understand one another. I'm very, very open with those people about things that I do, don't do, whatever. But, I'm a little curious. I don't really know for sure if that quote that I came across, if it's accurate, if it's really accurate about the genders or the masculinity type of stuff, the femininity type of stuff. But all I can look at really is, the Western perspective on relationships in general. That's kind of why I was bringing up all that stuff is like, if it says this type of male creates this type of female, or that type of male creates this other type of female, and then my question is, does it go the other way? Does one type of female create another type of male versus, if you're talking about strengths and weaknesses, so a strong male creating a feminine female and a weak male creating a masculine female, what does that say about a strong female and a weak female? What do they create? Does that have an interaction with a male, with how a male turns out? And then I am assuming that when they said male, that they're talking about father or like a father figure. And I'm assuming when, they didn't mention female, but I'm assuming that they would say female as well, that would be a mother or a mother figure. And those parental figures would create some kind of a masculine or feminine dynamic with their male or female kids. I don't know for sure. Based on them being strong or weak. I don't know. Because I don't really equate masculinity or femininity towards strength and weakness. I don't really see it that way. So if it's saying that like the masculine female is compensating for things versus the feminine female that's not compensating for some kind of masculine energy that's missing in life, I think you can be raised by a strong female and still be a masculine female, or be raised by a weak female and still be a masculine female or a feminine female. Like, I don't know if I really think that makes a difference too much. Maybe it does, but I don't think it does. Maybe it does, but I don't think it does. So, I don't know. Just because I don't really see masculine as stronger than feminine, or feminine as weaker than masculine. They're different, but they're not. One's not stronger than the other necessarily. So I feel like if the aspect of one was missing, then the other side wouldn't have to necessarily have to compensate, because they're not like missing necessarily. Like, I do think that parental figures, them being strong does create security and a lot of healthy dynamics in the way that their son or daughter chooses relationships later on in their life, whether that's with partners, with friends, whatever. Like, I think a lot of us have to figure that out. But the good thing about being an adult is you get to choose your own lifestyle, and live that lifestyle according to your own rules. But then that definitely can create a tense interaction between, if you're going back to that family that wasn't a very strong unit of parental figures. If you're going back to that family, you're not going to be super secure when you're around them or feeling like open around them. I noticed that, but I look at like friends, cousins, siblings, that dynamic of, maybe the weaknesses in the parental dynamics or with a specific parent, if it was only one, I think that does play a role in how people choose relationships. And they can choose strong relationships later in life, and that's just fine. And, they choose strong relationships in life on their own, or weak relationships in life if they're not really able to kind of form those bonds with ideal people. Like, there's still sometimes like, okay, I'm gonna keep getting into these same traps of these same types of relationship dynamics, of the comfort of the abuse, or the comfort of the negativity, or the comfort of the neglect, or the comfort of whatever they experience with that family dynamic. I could see it that way. I don't really know if I could see it like, a masculine, feminine, strong, weak type of thing. But I've definitely seen both sides of like, people choosing relationships with a familiarity that maybe wasn't healthy, that you still see that same dynamic with the parents. And then I could see people choosing, I have seen and witnessed, people choosing healthier relationships because they're like, oh, like, now that I don't have to live with these people anymore and I'm independent on my own, I can just kind of form my own kind of situation. Like, I definitely had that experience when I moved to San Diego, kind of away from the religious type people. I talk about it so much, that I was able to kind of make friends that I trust and, have community environments where I actually felt like safe and secure. Like, nothing's 110% perfect. I'm not 110% perfect either. But, there is like a healthiness to it versus like, let's just allow all this, like, these negative dynamics to keep happening in different relationships. But yeah, when it comes to, things going to a much deeper level with like partners and things like that with dating, it is kind of hard to think about, the family eventually needs to be somewhat involved, but also, I'm a big a big believer of, if it doesn't work out, if it really can't work out in a healthy way, it doesn't have to keep getting pushed, I've witnessed that for sure, where it's like one family member who might be really promoting unhealthy dynamics and they can't understand why everybody wants to stay away from them. It's like, because you're screwing things up all the time. It's like, I don't think people have to keep coming around those types of people. I don't think it's healthy. There's still, it's kind of like, it's still like, yeah, distancing or limiting contact with someone who wants to be in contact, even if they're not doing good things, that's an individual's choice, to make. You don't have to bend your boundaries for somebody who is completely off the rails and like abusive and things like that. You don't ever have to give in to that, even if other family members or people might be like, you often hear other family members be like, oh, it's okay, they're just that way, or like, oh, like, you should really, get in touch with them, and when you've already put your foot down and been like, look, no, not until they change, the horrible thing that they do or whatever, you don't have to give into that pressure. But I feel like there is going to be the pressure either way. There's going to be the pressure to stay involved with that type of person. And then there's also going to be the pressure to not, like the pressure to kind of do your own thing for your own self, what benefits you. So, yeah, I don't really think it's, I don't know. I don't really think it's, like, a really bad, gosh, the storm. I gotta shut this window again. Jeez. That was getting too loud. But yeah, I don't really, yeah, with the statement, I don't really know. But like the statement on Instagram on Fuzzrico's page, I don't really know. But I could be wrong. I don't know. But yeah, I don't really see it that way. For just because of the strength and weakness part, and I don't really see masculine is stronger than feminine, but I could see that, a parent role that drops the ball could create a weakness in the child, that maybe they would try in some ways to compensate. I mean, that to me isn't like too far off. But yeah. All right, so that's kind of most of what I'd have to say, just trying to combine all those topics. They may be vaguely related, but maybe they're all kind of combined, but just kind of looking at parental role dynamics and basically how the kids as adults kind of turn out, and kind of that back and forth relationship between parent and child when they're like an adult child, and how that kind of shapes and forms. Maybe like the quote itself wasn't really focusing on how it shapes and forms relationships between parents and kids later on. It was just kind of like focusing more on like how a female might be masculine or feminine. I mean, there wasn't a lot of context, and so I'm going based on like a sentence. It's like a one sentence kind of quote, and I'm like, that's an interesting idea, because it's easy to take it that way. It's easy to go that view, and I could see how that could be accurate as well. I just don't know. Like, I personally don't see it that way, but I think maybe I have seen it that way, because I was definitely, I'm not, I don't necessarily consider myself very masculine. That's one thing. I don't consider myself very feminine either. And my clothing style, like, this is something, okay, so something weird that maybe I'll touch on this in other episodes. I don't know yet. Something weird that I'm kind of noticing is, like, even though there might be females that wear, like, masculine type clothing from, like, the guys section of a store, I've noticed that the styles that a lot of us choose tend to still have a different kind of perspective to them. Like, for example, I like button downs, like, from the guys section, but I like flowery printed stuff, and like maybe like silky kind of shirts, and like I wear a lot of stuff that still has a lot of feminine aspects, and it's not necessarily because I I am trying to like fem it up or whatever. It's just if it's up to me to naturally choose, that's just where my mind goes. If I'm spending my own money on something that I prefer and like, I'm gonna choose those certain garments versus others. Like for myself, like for example, there's nothing wrong with it, but like I don't wear a tie or a bow tie. Like there's certain stuff like that that to me that would be a little masculine. Now if it was like in a wedding or something like that, that's a little different because it's like, okay, it's really formal. And formal events, you kind of have to pick one. You kind of have to pick a side. You can't just be all like weird in the middle. Like you got to be like super formal. And formality really does have a gendered aspect to it. And I think I want to touch on this more in a different episode because it's a very interesting idea, or point of ideas, or set of ideas. But yeah, I really do think though that a lot of females, I don't know the percentage, but I've noticed because I look at a lot of styling that there's a lot of like LA lesbians. They kind of have like style types of tips and stuff, and a lot of them tend to maybe shop in the guy section, but they don't look like they look more masculine than a really femme looking woman would, but they also don't look like a guy. You know what I mean? Like they have hips, they might have like chest features, even if their hair is cut a certain way, even if their mannerisms are a certain way. The type of clothing that they choose tends to be there's a little bit of a prettiness to it, if you will, like, or a little bit of a flavor to it that's not quite fully cis masc male, gendered looking. Like what I'm trying to say is I don't know a lot of guys who dress like me, and I shop in the guys section. I don't know any guys who really dress like me, you know. Now I wouldn't identify my clothing style as necessarily masculine, but it's more masculine than feminine because I'm not buying it. The cuts aren't from the women's section, you know. They're not like cleavage and all these weird like clinging angles and stuff, you know. It's different than that. So I don't know. I look at that maybe in a different episode because I don't want to make this like 3 hours long, but it's already going on 2 hours. We've already passed 1 hour. But anyways, for day 6, I'm not gonna do all the questions. But this is day 6. Is it day 6 or is it day 5? I read day 6. So let's see. Maybe it's day 5. No, it's day 6. So for day 6, the quote is an Eckhart Tolle quote. It says, "Observe your thoughts, don't believe them." And then, can you think of a specific moment that changed the trajectory of your life in a positive way? I mean, the first thing that kind of comes to mind after this whole entire segment of stuff I've been talking about is, you know, when I moved to San Diego, started meeting people that I wanted to be around and feeling like I could more be myself because those people were feeling more of a safer type of people to be around. And I was kind of choosing for myself the types of people I want in my life versus the types of people that, you know, maybe my parents might bring around or might have introduced me to, or, you know, led me to certain social interactions with people that were approved by them pretty much. Like, I kind of know who they expect me to be around, but I don't think that they choose certain qualities that I would choose. And then there's other qualities that I would choose that they wouldn't choose, you know? Like, for me, I don't really care too much what a person, has as maybe their education. I don't really care so much what a person has as their religion. I don't really care how a person spends their entertaining hours, if they party, if they go to clubs, if they go to bars, if they drink, if they smoke. I'm not gonna just be like, oh, like this is a thing that the religion says don't do it, and so I don't want to be around them because of their religion or whatever. Like, I do whatever I want to do anyways, and I hang out with people who are kind of more flexible with stuff. I've known super religious people too. I have friends who are super religious, and it's fine. Like, they just do their own thing, but they don't necessarily let a specific place, like maybe I'd say like maybe like a deal breaker type of a location would be like a strip club or something that's like a little like, maybe certain people might not want to be in that environment. But overall, if we're just going out for dinner and it happens to be at a bar, or it happens to be, we're celebrating a friend's birthday at a club or something, I don't know that many people who are just going to completely not go just because, oh, there's secular music and dancing and alcohol there. If they don't want to dance or if they don't want to drink, they won't do it, and they'll still participate in the party or interact, So that's kind of where I notice a lot of the things change for me. It's just like the open-mindedness. That's kind of different for me than for my parents, for the most part, I would say. But I get it. It's like when you're around certain people in certain environments, it's going to be hard to not want to do that other kind of stuff because everybody's doing it. And so because they're so hard and fast against doing certain stuff, they don't want to be around people who do that stuff. So I kind of get it. But I also don't really care. Like for example, I had cousins who were in town visiting a long time ago. I was probably in high school or maybe early college, and I was still living at home. I hadn't moved to San Diego yet. And I think these cousins wanted to have parties because they were on they came during spring break or something like that. And I think I had maybe 10-15 cousins come from the Midwest where they lived to come out to visit in LA. But my dad was like, if you guys are going to be partying, don't do it at the house. You need to go get your own place. And so they rented this apartment, or I don't think there were Airbnbs back then, but it was something equivalent to renting an apartment on the beach at Venice Beach where there was a jacuzzi or whatever, and they could get drunk and have their alcohol and have their fun and party. And I remember we met at Venice Beach once, and part of it, I remember walking around near where their place was, and we were at their place where they were renting, and a few of them were in the jacuzzi being all boisterous and drinking and had drinks in their hand. And I remember my folks trying to get me, not they weren't pushing me out of the way, but they were kind of we definitely weren't staying there. We were just coming by to say hi and be hey, we made it, we're in the area. Maybe 1 or 2 blocks down from where their apartment was, was the Strand, or that bike path. And then we were going to be just, as our family, hanging out at the beach and maybe barbecue or something, or eat whatever was there. I don't remember. But then they came from their apartment to hang out with us there. But I was just it's stuff like that where it's they don't even want alcohol in the house around them with, nieces and nephews that are adults. They're able to drink. They're just we don't want it in the house. And so I already know their viewpoints on things. They don't want it in the house. And I'm okay, you don't want it in the house, so I keep it in my stuff. I'm not actively drinking in the house or actively smoking in the house, but it's I definitely do it. I'll Uber back home with some drinks in my system. It's I'm not gonna avoid it. So yeah. So but yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I don't know. That's kind of all I have to say for this episode. It's getting really long, so I'm gonna stop recording. But It's almost like 2 hours long. But yeah, with that, thanks for listening.